Professor Mtume Gant is back with us. I'm
Peace,
Jared
everybody.
Ball. What's up, sir? What's up to the remixers in the audience? How you feeling, man?
I'm okay. It's a
How's
little
everything?
rainy. It's a little rainy out here in New York, but I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, we got the
Relaxed.
same in the Mid Atlantic. We've got about the
Okay.
same thing happening down
Okay.
this way.
Okay.
Are you mid semester right now?
I'm actually on sabbatical, so
Oh man, congratulations!
that's great. So it actually gives me time to spend with my daughter, who's now 3 months,
Yes,
and do some work, finish a film that I'm working on, and start brainstorming on some other projects. But yeah, I'm on sabbatical, which in this climate, with everything that's going on, I'm partly grateful to be on sabbatical at this moment with everything that's happening. I mean, we know what we're talking about. So
So, in other words, you mean this? You would enjoy this time to be in the classroom to talk about things? Is that
no,
what you
well,
mean, or no?
I think I'm glad to a certain degree that I can be here for my students. I still talk to a lot of my students with everything that's
Mm-hmm.
happening privately and even in small forums, but on my campus, like many others, it's a hostile environment, and me saying that's an untenured professor is probably not a good thing, but it's true. It's a hostile environment, and I don't know how I would navigate it at the moment. So I'm happy that I can give support in the ways that I can in this kind of certain stepped back fashion,
Mm-hmm.
through
Mm-hmm.
communicating through, think about this tactic, try this, think about this, or hey, good, I'm glad y'all did that. Good, good job, you know.
Man, I just had 3 classes this morning, and in all 3 of them, all of these issues come up, but they always again report that I'm one of the only ones doing it. So one of the tactics that faculty are choosing to take, some tenured, some not, is to just not bring it up and to discuss anything happening, certainly in Palestine, or but
Yeah.
to just and then the president just sent out another statement with, long story short, a strong caution to those who think that they're going to use university space to critique Israel, to critique. Now, he didn't mention this by name, but it's clear that that's the intent, and you're not going to critique the university's relationship, which some students have begun to do. So students have been posting signs around campus around end capitalism, free Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
and the admin is saying that's not good. You're gonna and they sent a map of the campus with a circle around the exact zone you're allowed to gather for any of these kinds of unsanctioned protest type events. And it's this one little space in between the walkway between the student center and the gym. And so and then only and then you still then cannot target any particular group or policy.
Mm.
And if you do, you will then be at least you are outside of university policy, and
Mm.
who knows what there's sort of left unsaid what could happen. So
Mm.
yeah, it's a difficult. Yeah, it's difficult
Yeah, I don't.
time.
This expectation that professors are to not bring up what's happening in the world on the classroom. I think you've brought it up. Even if they have an opinion that's pro-Israel, like
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. And I feel like in every class we're teaching about how they're going to function in the world at large. So how would this not come up? I mean, I was on campus when October 7th started, and that. So in my classes, it came up a couple of times, and I gave space, but I do know this semester it has ramped up in student activity, which I'm all for. Students need to put pressure, and it's their institution, and it's been great to see them do stuff. and I hope the flames keep, burning for them, and this puts a new, student activity towards social movements on campuses, in general. Ooh, you just went out, or did I?
Oh, sorry.
There you
I
go.
think I had muted
Hmm.
myself. So,
Hmm.
so I sort of, as a sort of segue, I mentioned in one of the classes that it's unfortunate that we're not having more vigorous conversations, even disagreement, if necessary, on the campus, because you're still entering a world into which films like Origin drop.
Yep.
And especially in this, I don't know, during the filming of the film, if I'm sure they weren't planning for the I don't know, an uptick or a reigniting of what's going on, but it falls right. I mean, it just indirectly plops right in, and then there is, to their credit, there's the one positive reference
To
to
Palestinians.
Palestinians,
Yeah.
which I'm wondering how much they were like, man, I wish I knew this was. I wish we had thought about this
Scrubbed it.
before October 7th. Yeah, like, but so as a segue, I mean, you've set up I think a great exercise of sorts for us today,
Hmm.
and I uh, so I'm using that as a segue to talk about. I know we both watched Origin,
Hmm.
and I saw someone in the chat saying I made you do it during your sabbatical. I was like, no, I didn't make him do it. I didn't
No,
make him do it.
no, not at all. Not at all.
But
I would say, I
yeah, go
would say,
ahead.
I would say, Jared gave me a positive reason to watch something that I probably would not watch. No, actually, I would get around to watching it at some point. But actually, this was a proactive watch, for something that I was good to be suspicious would not follow my ideological and artistic fancies on any level.
Have you read Wilkerson's book Cast
No,
by any
no,
chance? Yeah,
no.
I
So,
haven't
well,
either.
I
Yeah.
haven't. I was familiar with it. Then I
Mm-hmm.
actually, coincidentally, I had, when I got wind of Dr. CBS, who used to be on your or on your platform from
Yep.
time to time.
Yep.
That was one, maybe the second thing I had ever read from her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, because someone that I knew made an offhand negative critique of the book, and I was like, okay, well, what is this? And then I read Dr. CBS's piece, and I was just like, what? My blade was like, whoa. And there was another piece, I think, in Black Agenda Report on it as well that I had read. Um, but and then I think, I believe I watched an interview with Wilkerson, and I found the ideas to be half baked and frankly uninteresting. Actually, that was actually my first kind of reaction. They were. It was like, there's moments where I'm like, why is someone trying to rewrite the script when the script does not need a new version? But actually, the script does need a new version for different purposes, which I think we'll get
And do you
into.
think the movie answers your question? Because I felt like the
No.
movie might be answering in terms of why she would want to. Because
Oh
I wrote,
yeah.
because my note was, and I don't know how much of this is actual to her autobiography or to her life or her biography, but was this is Cast really just an attempt for her to reconcile her interracial relationship?
I wrote I wrote something very similar. I
Like
totally agree
what are
with
we
you.
doing here? We got to rewrite all of world history to make it coincide with you having a white husband. I'm
Yeah.
like, have him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, have him. But why we
Yeah.
got to go through
Yeah.
all of this?
Why do we have to have Dalits being tortured and images of slaves for you to feel good about your white husband? I totally agree with you. I
And for you to tell us that the common thread in that is not white supremacy, it's not capitalism, it's not colonialism, it's some. I don't by even calling it caste. It's not. It seems to even do caste structures a disservice because there seems to be
yeah.
no origin for it or
Yeah.
explanation. It just is. And and by starting even with the trauma of Trayvon Martin, to have
Hmm.
us then say, but that's not lynching. That's not plantation enslavement. So how could they all be racism? I was like, wow, this
Right.
is this is. And then because Jews were killed in the Holocaust and Dalits are untouchables in India, Trayvon's killing is not racism. I was like, wow. I was
Yeah.
like, this is a lot. You're doing a lot.
Yeah.
And then it did
Well,
feel like all to justify her. But okay, that was
but not just her white husband. I think a certain
yeah,
cosmopolitan lifestyle
yeah,
that
yeah.
she values as well. Like I mean, I think the white husband is a part of it. I mean, I'd be curious for you as a scholar, someone who has a PhD. I watched it, and my thought was Wilkerson's a bad scholar. The way
Oh,
she comes up with her scholarship, it felt full of bias. It felt poorly researched. Her controls were loose at best. I'm not a researcher. It's not in my field. I do research. I do artistic research, right, to create pieces. But I watched it, and I'm as an audience member, I was left uninspired by her approaches towards it. And if the film wanted to prove a point, it did an extremely poor job of it. It did an extremely poor job of it. And is that Wilkerson's fault? Is that Duvernay's fault? I don't know, but 'cause I haven't read Wilkerson's book and I haven't sifted enough through her work to say that, well, this is this. Though I trust people like Dr. CBS and others who have had pointed critiques on it to like know that it's not worthy scholarship.
No, that's why I was asking, and I reposted a clip of that last night or this morning as sort of prep for today. That I asking her, what is going on with her scholarship? What happened methodologically? And so I would defer to CBS on that as well, Dr. CBS on that. And but what we see in the film is, I guess you could call it a kind of ethnographic interviewing research she's doing, and then she picks up one Dalit scholar.
Right.
But what I would be looking for, so I don't remember everything CBS said about the poor scholarship, other than that it was poor scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
But what I see happening in the film, what I would want to see her doing, in addition to getting these anecdotal stories from people, that the handful of people that she interviews, and to your point, not assessing the class element in all of that at all. I don't see her investigating the scholarship on caste, be it in India or as people have related it to the Black experience here or elsewhere.
Right.
So that would have been what I was looking for. You're showing us the methods of the interracial scholars back in the early 20th century, or in the I don't know, what was it, 1950s or 40s? No, right before the Second World War.
Yeah.
You're showing us their method of doing library research and immersing themselves in various communities to assess that. But you're not. But what I would want to see, or as a scholar or a consumer of scholarship, is that what is the literature of the Holocaust saying? What is the literature of the Dalit experience saying? And then if they're right or wrong, tell us why, and then fill it in or make the connections. But going around and hearing the trauma tales of what could be described elsewhere as the Pan-African experience, because she left out the part that the Dalits are also darker traditionally. Like, she left out that part.
Well, what's interesting, there is even a statement in the film that caste in India has nothing to do with racial appearance.
Yeah.
So she actually eliminates that as part of caste system in India.
And then she says Jews are white, so therefore it can't be race. But when I haven't read it all, but the literature I've read on they're talking of Jews as they would of Black folks.
Yeah.
They're equating Black. The whole point was to with that whole what is it phenomenology, that
Yeah.
whole field that
Mm-hmm.
gets. They're trying to say, look at their skulls. They're like the Negro and this and that. They all
Right.
like jazz.
Yeah,
all,
and if you look at the racist imagery or the anti-Semitic imagery from Nazi Germany, the films that they made, there would always be these physical traits that they would associate with Jews, right? I mean, whether they were true or not or exaggerated is not really the point, but to say that there is no physical aspect and that Aryan, actually even the Aryan look, actually you have to look at this from the side of the villain. The Nazis absolutely prioritize the Aryan image. There's all this talks about Hitler hated his dark hair,
absolutely,
right? And he loved
absolutely.
the blonde Aryan
That was the whole point of
looking
the
man.
Olympics.
Exactly. And it's like it's disingenuous. That's all I
It
have
was
to
just a
say.
mess.
It's a
Yeah,
mess. It's
that
a mess.
that's what I'm saying. So show me the scholarship where this is supported, because everything I've read, again, it's not everything, but everything I've read about it says what you're saying is just that they're making this direct. So what she does is also slick, because as you point out, with erasing the colorism in the Indian structure, she literally says that the Nazis were only copying the segregation laws of the South of the United States to learn how to separate Jews from whites. I mean, yeah, Jews from whites, but without talking about what you and I are just adding in here, that they actually did have a racialized component to the whole thing that they were imposing on Jews. So it was, yeah, the whole thing is just absurd.
Yeah.
In terms of the film depiction of her work and her methodology. Again, having not read the book, I want to be clear on that. But the film doesn't help her in presenting this argument. It does explain why her book and the film would be welcomed, and why it would
Right.
become a Ava DuVernay product, and so on and so on and so on, because it gives another comfortable way of talking about these histories and leading the audience to a conclusion that's not going to invite any critique or uncomfortable or unsanctioned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, you
that
said a
was all I
word.
had on that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
you
sorry. Go
said
ahead.
a word that's really important, and that's the word. The word is trauma, and that, I believe, is DuVernay's interest in Wilkerson completely, and this idea of a virtuous sufferer. Like, she is melodrama incarnate. We have these kind of these virtuous sufferer characters. It's interesting. I read an interview with DuVernay, and one of the films she referenced was Schindler's List. So this idea of the virtuous hero or heroine, um in you know and the virtuous sufferers come in many angles in this film, but I think she sees suffering as the linkage to everything, because these people suffer, they have a link,
Right.
and then
Right.
people then become limited to what they're suffering. And we know liberals love that, and this is where I think we start peeling back. You realize how toxic the whole ideas of this film and the presentations of it are. It actually is quite nasty. I have to admit, it was one of the hardest 140 minutes I ever had, and I'm on record for never really enjoying DuVernay's work. I've always found her work to be either reductive at best, or, I mean, downright uh, almost perverse, I think, at times. And I think she really kind of dove into this, right? And so I'm watching it, and I'm like, okay, so we have this educated elite person, right, who has these trials, right? She has the mother, it's the melodrama techniques. I've talked about it before, right? The mother is at the end. There's a kind of suggestion that she had a father at one point. He's not around, or for some reason they don't really ever dive into that. I mean, pretty quickly.
Yeah, at all. Right.
No,
Yeah.
she asks the man with the "Make America Great Again" hat about his father, and it says you're lucky to have him, which I didn't take. I didn't know how to take that. Was that he walked out? Was it some kind of absentee father thing? Did he die? It was a little too cryptic. I couldn't quite parse it out. I almost didn't understand why she even had it, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I guess dramatically they were trying to show Wilkerson is trying to make a connection with a man who was not, who clearly was a racist, using the MAGA hat as a thing, but it was
So
very,
I took it
very
as,
thin.
and I'm no, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm biased by it, but I took it as this was another shot at the absentee black father
You're
being
probably
used as a
right.
trope to show how this could be used to make friends with the racist plumber.
Totally,
And I was like, oh.
you're totally probably right. And it was like,
But the point is, you're right. They didn't explain it.
and
Yeah.
explain it, but like I think in leaving it that absent and that lack of of girth, one could come to that conclusion very easily, right? And so what I found interesting as I kept watching the movie was virtuous sufferers. And very early, she presents the Trayvon Martin character, which I have to say, my biggest question with the Trayvon thing is who asked for a reenactment of Trayvon Martin's murder?
When I
Who
saw that, I said, "What?" I literally out of my mouth said, "What the fuck, man?" I wasn't ready for that. What are we doing? And then you hear everything. And with all the amped up audio,
all
the
of it
screaming, the gunshot. I'm like, what are we doing?
doing here? What are we doing? What is the
I'm with you
purpose?
on that.
What is the purpose of that? But then I have to go back to suffering. DuVernay wants us to suffer. Well, see suffering and us connect through suffering, right? And she wants to make these linkages of suffering. So I'm like, okay, this is what she's doing. I already don't buy it. I think it's a manipulative technique that's bush league and just bad. It's poor artistic. It actually doesn't give much credit to audiences. It actually belittles audiences. It treats them like children. It's not sophisticated. I was repulsed by it, be honest with you. So but okay, this is what you're doing, sufferer. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, then what is the linkage between Trayvon and Wilkerson? Like, what is this real linkage? Not just black people. And I said, oh, and then she has the other story about the Jewish man who, oh no, no, the Aryan, he's the Aryan man, the white German who marries the Jewish woman in
Right.
secret. Yes, he has that story. And
Which
then I
ends in
begin
more trauma.
more trauma, and then I realized what this was. I said, and the ending proved it to me. I said, oh, Wilkerson is the watchwoman who will give virtue to these sufferers.
Oh wow.
And I said, black elites are out of their mind.
Ah.
They are out of their mind. They have lost their mind.
So after our last conversation, my note was she would love American fiction. Like that's her movie.
I'm sure she does. I mean, they're all. I mean, we'll probably get into some facet of this, but it's all a clique of people there, and they love each other and they kind of hobnob. It's all self-serving to each other. It's funny. I still have people within the industry that I have relationships with, even if they're distant. And I saw them sharing about how important Origin is. And I was like, before I saw it, I was like, really, y'all? Okay, interesting. Y'all there definitely seems to be a kind of alliance around Ava for this film, to make sure that it's, seen as a seminal work. Absolutely are, right? So then if you keep kind of going through that, I realized the film kept amplifying single defiant people, right?
Mm.
She was very big to show there were all these Nazis doing the, you know, the Nazi
But
symbol.
there was the one.
Exactly. And like have him center mass, looking like down, you know, looking. and
That
I
was crazy,
and I was
man.
like, okay, so she's really going to go into this idea of the individual heroes in the trail of deplorables, right? It's the Hillary Clinton logic, you know. And I'm watching it and
Yes.
I'm going, Ava, like, okay, homegirl, like keep going. So, you know, individualism, but then I just go back to liberalism. It's just all liberalism. It just goes back to that, right? Individual exceptionalism, breaking that mold, right? And then, you know, then Wilkerson becomes a mold breaker. That's where her and Ambedkar, who I don't know much about, but I had a quick conversation with a friend about him, and then Dr. CBS, I think, also said this in her article, if I remember correctly, that Wilkerson completely misinterprets parts of his work.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. But I
I
don't know. But I
Yeah,
don't know. But I am
I
sure.
don't know his work, but I've been told that, and you know, and then I think also like to classify someone like Ambedkar, and I don't know him, but I think there's something pernicious about making him an individual when his work seemed, even from what she said, to be about people.
Yeah.
It just there's something really yucky about it to me that I just don't find good. And yeah, so like, you know, the caretakers of our future are the social and liberal and intellectual elite, right? You got Blair Underwood. What's the first thing that Blair Underwood does when he gets the tapes? I have to go find Isabel. Right? It's like I felt like I was watching a superhero movie, right? It's like I mean,
Wow.
in
Right.
many ways, though. I mean,
It is. Yeah.
it actually gets a little bit more superhero, you know, and
Yeah. That's what it is. And he does. I had to. And he has to bring her out of her little retirement or whatever, her hiatus or whatever. I gotta.
she's
It's
Captain
that whole
America,
thing.
right? She's
And
Captain
she,
America.
and just like all the I didn't even think of it. All of them, they always start with, no, I can't. I don't even write that. I don't do that kind of work. I resist. I refuse. Only to
Right.
dun 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 dun,
Right.
dun come in like
Exactly. Come
I'm gonna
into it,
do it in
right?
the end. And it's
Right.
all
It's
that is it really, you know, is Trayvon really the same as a lynching? Is the same as being followed in a store? I'm really adding something new, and people are sipping their shit. Oh yes, Isabel. Wow, right.
mm-hmm.
All making the adding to the out of their mind elites are saying, but we are the ones who will explain all of this. And she goes to her little ghetto cookout, and she can have her auntie say, break it down, make it plain. Don't make it so confusing because I don't understand race all these
Yeah.
years in my little ghetto cooking my
Yeah.
chicken.
But did you notice that she never went to one black intellectual in the film? That didn't hit me till after the film. I
Actually, it's
was
just hitting
didn't.
me now. Yeah,
Yeah, I
even
didn't
with
it
my
didn't till
point about the
after.
methodology, she doesn't. Yeah, it's not
She doesn't
one.
go to one. And then even when she made it plain, I thought I was also, is DuVernay gonna have her go, you know, around, which also would have been, I don't think would have been great either, but is she gonna have her go around and talk to regular black folk, regular people, and get their experiences, right? Is she gonna? There was none of that. She said, "Make it plain," and I was like, "Okay, empty statement, nothing much else there." Or she did go to the one. There was the one. You're right. The pool at the end.
Well, what I'm thinking of
Oh,
is
but she
I'm
didn't go to
thinking.
him. She was the white guy. My bad. I'm
Yeah,
wrong,
no, I'm
actually. Go
saying
ahead.
what I'm saying is that there's a montage of her talking to various people, and I'm just saying that
You're right.
theoretically, it could be argued that that would have been the scholarship or the speaking to the black scholars about it. But at no point in the film, so again, but at no point in the film do we see her being seated or talking to someone whose scholarship is on the issues of race or caste or whatever and having this discussion. We don't see her. We see the flashback to the older scholars going to a library, but we don't see her in libraries, if I'm not mistaken. We don't see her doing scholarship. We see her doing interviews, and then we see and many of them all just seem to be with the bourgeoisie. She doesn't interview her aunt at the cookout,
No, no.
but she's doing all these interviews with people who at least look. Again, we don't hear what they're saying. We don't get the context, but they look like they're all doing quite well, and they're all beautiful, walking in beautiful scenic spaces, having off-air conversations that all apparently lead to her, except for the one friend she talks to at length about the racist experience she had. But again, in a very beautiful home, with the conclusion being, this is caste, and you've helped me see that more. The woman never, by the way, says, I would have thought a natural reaction would have been, wait, my whole life I've been thinking and crying, because she's crying telling the story, trauma, again. But she doesn't say, I thought it would have been natural for her to say in that moment, break this down for me, because my whole life I thought this was a white man being racist. Now you're telling me it's caste. How does make it work for me?
Yeah.
Like, because I didn't know this until I thought we were in a racist society until yesterday.
Right. And also, like, at the core is, why do we need this reanalysis? And the insistence consistently by the Wilkerson character is that we flattened everything to race.
Right.
But then she does another reduction. She just adds if she's saying that race is a reduction, she just gives us another reduction. I'm watching it like I'm like when I watch a film and a film is based on an argument, a thesis, I'm like, prove it to me. So I'm watching it going, I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. When it just comes to like the words, but then visually, I actually understand what's happening. When I look at the form and the construct of the film, I then begin to see what the filmmaker is attempting to do. And in a way, DuVernay has to make her argument thinner and lean it on her emotional trials, and then connecting her emotional trials to the trials of everyone else in order for us to buy it. We buy it based on an emotional buy-in, not based on anything that's actual scholarship or real ideas. It's a manipulation. It's an emotional manipulation. I mean, one of the other things I found interesting was like this kind of idea of a secret intellectual class. The two black scholars and the two white scholars. And I'm not familiar with this history at all of these kinds of, and I found it also unconvincing because I don't know what they really exposed. It's like, oh, they got to see the burning books and like, okay, and Fritz Lang saw it too, and he got the hell out of Germany, right? Like many Ingrid Bergman saw it and said, you know what? I ain't acting here no more. I'm out. Many people saw it. This was not like, this secret thing happening in the corner, right? Like,
And again, I'm sorry, but we're meant to get that these scholars got together after their negative experience in Germany to then figure out, based on that, what was happening in the southern United States. And that was supposed to be part of the connection we were supposed to draw from that, if I'm not mistaken. And then, but to your point, I'm watching the same thing, and all I got was more of, to your point about, I didn't think of it quite that way, but they're literally having a secret intellectual conversation. Then the darker skinned black woman comes around, their neighbor, and they're like, they start changing their speech. They start trying to sound like they're from the community, in that particular community. And even she's looking at him like, I'll just go get you a plate.
Right. And so
and
then
I'm like,
when
what
I watched
is that?
and then I watched that scene, am I supposed to believe that this black woman is not to be trusted, or yeah, we want to connect with our sister, but our work is so important that we must be in secret. We can't. It's the superhero thing again, right? It's this idea. It's it's the Clark Kent moment.
And then they're all Harvard professors who then I think we're meant to understand that they take this research, publish it, they go off they're taking their victory lap photographs. And are we meant to then understand that the Black woman that they've left in that community now has a better understanding of her condition after their work is published? Is that what the success was?
Mm-hmm.
Is that or is it meant to say that there was a sea change in the national consciousness about the Deep South after these interracial couples come back with their I mean, it was bizarre. The whole thing was bizarre. And then to your point, are there no other scholars writing about segregation in the South
Oh, not at all.
at
Not at
any
all.
point
None.
ever?
No.
We
No.
gotta and we have to somehow live in these fake lives and that's how we're going to do our research, by pretending to be someone else and basically lying to our neighbors, our subjects, our colleagues, and then that's how you do research. I was like, this is nuts. This is all nuts.
Yeah. And I'm watching it, and there got to a point where then I had to leave Wilkerson and I had to start thinking about the director, about DuVernay. Because, when a film is made, you are seeing the filmmaker's preoccupations, and their ideological fixations, the things that they believe are important for us to get. And in the film and also in other works, DuVernay, she consistently exposes her class preoccupations. I'm watching Wilkerson, and she needs to highlight that Wilkerson can exist in I wouldn't even call them multicultural spaces. I would call them white spaces. And if they have an element of non-whiteness within them, it's just non-whiteness vetted by whiteness. So she has a preoccupation with that being of serious worth and that having to be displayed. And we must trust Wilkerson because white people love her. And Blair Underwood, who a certain generation of women absolutely love, runs after her to give her some tapes, right? And then what's, I think, also toxic is, yes, Wilkerson's a real person. Her mother, what happened with her mother is really real. Her husband, and her was her cousin, yeah, these are terrible things. But DuVernay uses it to construct narrative struggles, like I said, so she doesn't have to prove any of the ideas are of worth. The proof is the fact that she's suffering. And I said, that's just weak. And that's what people are encouraged to do these days in general. They don't have to prove their ideas. They can be anecdotal or say, well, I lived it or something like that, and not be taken, and also not be taken to task, right? And I'm watching the film try to develop a lexicon around it, love, hate,
Endogamy.
yeah.
We got the whole blackboard lesson on endogamy.
Right.
So I made a note. Is it endogamy versus white supremacy now? Like endogamy versus capitalism now? It's endogamy versus colonialism. I was like, this is deep. We're really getting a whole new. And I think you raise a really good point about that I just wanted to co-sign that I just lost it. The last thing you just said. But yeah, whatever you just said was right. Yeah. So I'll just leave it at that.
So no, but I'm gonna piggyback off of you. I wrote here, using interracial love as a way to prove her thesis that our division is about mentality and not material history. And that the antidote to that is cosmopolitanism.
That's it. And that's what I was, yeah. And I agree with you that I had thought if I were Wilkerson, I would be, although the politics, it matches that she wouldn't feel this way, but I think you should be offended at the use of all my suffering.
Right.
Like my mother
100%.
dies, my husband dies, my cousin dies, and you turn it in, you use all of that to create this story. I would be furious. But of course, she's, I'm sure, did the same or something similar or has no problem with it.
I mean, I
But
don't
yeah, that's the
know
thing. Yeah, yeah.
if they worked on
Would
the
you speak?
script
Yeah, go
together.
ahead.
I don't know if they worked on the script together, but I'm sure she had to vet a little bit of it, And I also wrote here, the film actually exposes Wilkerson's biased position and viewpoint for naming the root cause to be separation of races through marriage.
Wow.
And I was like, this is just a bias. And I was like, at the end of the movie, I said to myself, I just watched a film about someone who has a thesis based on her hardship, and she's trying to squeeze a large thing into a small box to make her feel better about her own. Not just as I don't think it's just her marriage. I think it's also her class pursuits,
No,
but
I agree.
also
Yeah, definitely.
Duvernay.
Yeah.
But I think her marriage also is part of her class pursuits. I'm not saying inherently marrying white means that. What I'm saying is she
In
has a
this
very
case.
in this case, she has a very clear class pursuit that she's putting together. And then also Duvernay. I mean, Duvernay wants to present this, I think, emotional protection for her class, and then you see it in the construction of the film. There is, I'm watching the film the texture of the film, and I'm like, what did they shoot this on? So I go look, they shot it on 16 millimeter film to kind of give it like weight, emotional weight. Because the one thing I did say was, I said it actually looks nicer than other films that I've seen her done. I found like Selma always looked very plastic to me, which is a shame because Bradford Young, her old cinematographer, I think is very gifted, but that film looked very plastic to me. I was like, this actually has a weight to it. I was like,
It did. Yeah, yeah. So that
and
makes sense. They use
I
that.
said it didn't
Yeah,
look half
yeah.
bad. I was like, so let me Google it. I was like, oh, Kodak 16 millimeter. So she's chasing aesthetics, which I want to get into at some point. She's chasing aesthetics that give off the idea of weight, of worth, of vintage. This is really, I do actually think Origin is her trying to kind of make her stamp and statement as a cinematic artist, in this. And but the fact that this is her cinematic statement is, very, 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 very strange. But yeah, the mobility, it gets into this mobility stuff again. Like, it gives you access, makes you cosmopolitan, more worldly, multiculturalist, and thus you are more elevated, right? Because Wilkerson sees through the whole race thing, which is reductive, and I see it as caste, and I can connect the Jewish people to the Dalits, the black people, and I can sit here with German intellectuals and Indian intellectuals and white intellectuals, but I was like, where's the black intellectuals? Like, she don't need black intellectuals.
She
The only
is that.
she is the black, she's the watchwoman. She is that person. Um,
Mm.
you know, she's the more elevated scholar. And then I got offended. And then I just got offended at all the amazing
Mm.
scholars. I listened to your talk with Joy James yesterday. And I'm like, look, I want Wilkerson to sit on a room with her and try to give me some real, because you want to talk about serious scholar.
There's no green lights coming from that, though.
No, of course
There's
not.
no green lights
Of
coming from
course
that.
not.
By the
Um,
way, she
mhm.
also, speaking of scholarship, she does another traditional abuse of Dr. King by freezing him in 1959 in his speech in defense of Dalits, and then you can erase everything else that he would have eventually evolved to, someone obviously clear on white supremacy, colonialism, and capitalism, but
Yeah.
and militarism. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I heard that, but I was like, I'm not as schooled. I was like, I feel like Jerry gonna have something on that, because I saw that.
Well,
I
that
was like,
was it.
something
As
felt off about that to me
No, it's
when I
because
saw it.
it's as soon as you leave, it's again, it's the same trick of leaving the Bob Marley film focused in the 1978 concert instead of the 1980 concert in Zimbabwe. You pin yourself to a very safe it's like you put the what is it the tether ball, and then the tether ball's only going to spin so far because you planted it safely in this 1959, and then everything else he says over the next 8-9 years that turn him into the enemy of the state, you could just leave that out because the film
Yeah.
doesn't want to deal with class, and it doesn't
No.
want to deal with race, and it doesn't want to deal with colonialism. So you have King, and then we hear him. They found the audio
Right.
of him talking about his experience in India. And it's like, but that wasn't, but you're taking him to conclusions he did not reach. And you've frozen him in 59 so you can keep him in a nice little, when Du Bois only wrote Souls of Black Folks, so you don't have another 60 years of analysis to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
It's some real slick shit. And I'm like, man, they did it again.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah, I could tell just because of how the film was constructed, it's untrustworthy because it doesn't how it moves through telling stories and then always trying to link it back to images of trauma. I was always untrustworthy. The part of the film that I found to be even the worst to deal with, though, was when she's writing the book. And you see this aestheticized suffering. You have the slave ships, the egregious shot of, I believe it was, of someone in the Holocaust being shot and then cutting to Trayvon being shot. And in cinema, you are taught to use image to make linkage. That is what that is montage, right? You connect pieces, but montage in itself does not necessarily mean truth. I mean, Leni Riefenstahl proves that to you, right? If anyone doesn't know who that is, look her up. She was the queen Nazi propagandist.
Yeah.
Movies like Triumph of Will and all that type of stuff. And
a
she
Jew.
Was, and yo.
That's part of the contradiction that she struggled with. So we have to, again, like, by the way, I've used that example when people say Jews run Hollywood. I'm like, but to what end? Because she's a perfect example of what it means to be in charge of an industry you're not really running.
Right.
But we can always come back to that.
Yeah.
Because in this part we also get the lynching, right? Of this series of traumas, right? We get a whole
the lynchings.
I'm in there like, man, you're right. She really wanted us to suffer because I was in there struggling. I was sitting here struggling. I'm like, man, this is.
Yeah, I had just put my daughter to sleep, or my fiance was putting my daughter to sleep, and I was sitting here watching it, just going like, are you serious? Are you really going? Yeah, I mean, the scenes of Dalits being humiliated. I just, but it made me honestly go back to. It made me actually think of Walter Benjamin. And when Benjamin talked about how we can see what modern times has given to us in our kind of alienation of self and connectivity, it has now brought us to the point where we aestheticize our own suffering and watch it back for pleasure. And this film also made me think about the politics of pleasure in a way, and why do we need to see things, and then what does DuVernay get out of subjecting mass audiences and mass culture to this kind of imagery over and over again. And I'll focus mainly on the blackness because I don't think she really cares about Jews, or she doesn't really care about Dalits either. Her concern really is with blackness. And Benjamin talked about the aestheticization of politics, right? How when you aestheticize politics, you defang it, and you create a world where politics only lives in the sphere of sloganeering, things we know to be ineffective, faux political movies and so forth and so on. And there's many cousins and many sides to it. But I think you can apply that to blackness. This is an aestheticization of blackness. And if you think about blackness as a political position, it gets even more crazy. She's using blackness as an aesthetic, and she's using it to let us sit through suffering, to bring home her point, to then give cover to herself and to her class elite people, and really doing the work of empire in Hollywood, basically saying, look, this is the political thing, origin. This is what black people need to go and watch their pain regurgitated. So they'll go out and do this. This is the politics you need to, support. Jason England recently wrote about American fiction in The Defector. Shout out to Jason, and he talked about this in the wake of the George Floyd killings. What Black Hollywood asked for was more work. The justice that you're going to give us for the murder of Floyd is better movie deals. Origin. So it's a manipulative circle. It keeps DuVernay employed at an elite level. It keeps someone like Wilkerson able to stay employed at an elite level. Things don't change for people on the bottom. Material conditions don't change. And these people maintain an elite status with white capital. And it's disgusting. I at the end of the film, when she's and this is like the last superhero moment, when Wilkerson walks off and she sees all the faces. I didn't say this. Someone wrote this on Letterboxd. They said at the end she sees the Trayvon Martin Force ghost.
Oh, damn.
It's real though.
It's
like
what it is.
Like she sees, for people who haven't seen the movie or never want to, when Wilkerson finally finishes the book, and I think she's already presented the findings. I don't know if the book is out yet, but she's presented her thesis and her case. She leaves her, she has to, they juxtapose it with her closing off her mother's house to sell it. Mm-hmm. Because she wants to move on in her life, because also it's the house she lived in with her husband. So she walks out the door after everything, and first she sees the two black people from the two black Harvard scholars, and they nod at her. It's real Anakin.
Right.
Look, nod at her. Then she sees Ambedkar, I believe, next, and he gives a nod. And then at the end, you see Trayvon Martin with his hood. He takes it off. And I said, you people are out of your mind. You are out of your mind. But this is the thing. I mean, I'm dated on reading this stuff, but it's amazing to me how much black classes practice mirrors white classes practice of old. They used to do this thing with poor people, that this idea of whites would have this way they would interact with the poor and help them out in a way that and have experience with them, so they could elevate their own virility a bit. Like being with the poor and being an advocate of the poor is a way to justify my humanity, right? And it's mirroring the worst of white upper class habits when I watch it, and it's nasty. It's very nasty, and it's not. And I think also I've become really sensitive to it, because I see it a lot. I don't just see it in movies. I see it in areas and spaces that I go to. I remember I went to a black film festival some years ago, and they presented a film that was about very like poor black people, and like everyone had on these nice suits, right? And everything, and they had a presentation of the people, and there was all this kind of celebration of each other. And I was like, okay, so we got this film about black people suffering, and we're gonna have a big clapping session. I couldn't take it. I had to walk out the back. And a colleague of mine who felt the same way, we kind of looked at each other. We were like, yeah, we don't live in these spaces. It's very nasty. And but that's what these films are. And there's a whole class of them. And it's fine. Even if you look at the producers of these films, it's very interesting too. Like Chris Paul was a producer. Malcolm Brogdon. Yeah.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
Brogdon. Wait, who's Chris? Wait, Chris.
Chris
What
Paul,
Chris Paul?
the basketball player. He was
The
a producer on
basketball
Orange.
player, Chris
Yes,
Paul, CP3.
he was he was a funder. I also know she went to. I
Oh, I
believe she went to
missed
the
that
Ford.
part.
She went to the Ford Foundation for it as well. A lot of institutional money went into this film. You
It makes
know,
sense.
it makes sense. You know, there is, and
Wow.
it's just it's a bad work for many reasons. But to me, the leading reason is the manipulative faction of it, because once you get through the I can't say good aesthetics. I'll say what's the word I'm looking for? Familiar aesthetics. And you go through that, you find a film that has a dishonest narrative, a structure that doesn't even challenge the protagonist. I also found that interesting. She's never really challenged. And her challenges are always very thin. Like when she's challenged by the German woman, which I also found that interesting. Because the German, I was like, I kind of agree with the German woman. So something wrong with me? When
Wait,
the German
which
woman
part was
said,
this?
remember when she has dinner with the German couple, and there's there's an Asian guy. I guess he's a collaborator with her. They also did not explain well who these people were. East Asian brother was with her, and the German woman played by that I forget Connie Nielsen is the actress. She says straight out, it's not the same. I was like, I mean, she's right. Like she's right. And then it's her cousin's answer is, "Oh, just leave those people alone." There is no real analytical argument. The
Right,
analytical
right,
argument is
right.
her finding the book, the minutes to a meeting where the Nazis borrowed ideas from Jim Crow.
Jim Crow. Right, 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 right. But but again, she can make that point without talking about how they racialize Jews in an attempt to quote unquote blacken them.
Yeah.
Because it's not race, it's caste. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I forgot.
Yeah.
I didn't catch. I don't think I caught what you're saying, but I remember the scene. I definitely didn't
Yeah.
catch what you're saying. But I
Yeah.
remember the scene. Yeah.
Yeah, and just in general, you know, kind of summing it up, when I look at a film, I always look as how do you treat your main character? Like how much do you hold them accountable? What are their trials like? And then you're an antagonist. How do you use them? And the weird thing is the film doesn't really have an antagonist. It has it's a drama with a her antagonist is her trauma and her dealing with her trauma. That's self-serving.
Or the idea that that racism itself is an
Right.
antagonist. She's got to
So then,
defeat that.
no, but I think you're absolutely right. It then becomes an intellectual idea is an antagonist. But then I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Really present the idea. Give me the series. Then you need to battle the serious scholars out there, and she don't battle none of them. So I basically
No,
watched
she
a fight
circumvents them.
that didn't
Yeah.
happen. Yeah, she did. She
Yeah.
bob and weaves them the whole
Yeah.
time,
Well,
right?
I'm saying she just avoided the whole fight and walked straight
Yeah,
to collect her belt. Like she didn't even have to fight anybody. She just like, here's the belt. Like when they
here's the
gave
belt.
Obama the Peace Prize and said, we hope you earn it one day. It's like,
Yeah,
like we'll give
yeah,
it to you in advance of doing anything. And then,
yeah.
we don't want you to actually, because she wouldn't make it through that fight.
No.
So like one of the points that CBS brings up, I mean, it would have been great. And there are people who have written specifically on this that like Wilkerson apparently doesn't do this in her literature, so we're not going to see it in the movie. But she could have metaphorically walked through Oliver Cox and whoever else, who's saying something she probably doesn't. It would be some work for her, but it is, to use that metaphor again. It's the person that avoids the real fights. They just fight the bums. They like, I'm not fighting that. I'm not fighting Oliver Cox.
Right.
Give me some unnamed, unspoken, nobody. I don't have to deal with it.
She's a paper champ, right? She's the paper champ, right? Right. What is it? It's the scene in Rocky 3 when Mickey has to admit to Rocky, look, man, all them
You're
fights.
not ready, Rock.
he said you got civilized,
He'll murder you, Rock. He'll murder you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what it is. It's like either Wilkerson or someone knows, like, if you sit up there with the real people, you'll be destroyed. But Oprah's not going to challenge you, and Duvernay's going to give you a glorified electronic press kit. He'll knock you tomorrow.
He'll knock you tomorrow, Rock.
Yeah, he'll knock you tomorrow.
That's it. So they said, nah, we're going to put you on the glossy 16 millimeter. We're going to put some nice music on the joint, some filter whatevers, and then boom.
Make you look like
straight
a
to get your belt.
superhero, and you got it, right? And it'll be all, it's iconography. It's
all right. So look, because I think I am going to have to go pick up the girls in 30 to 45 minutes or so.
Okay.
I want to because at the risk. So now you're really going to have to do some work, Professor Gant.
Okay,
because
let's do it.
you also assigned me to watch Top of the Heap.
Yeah.
And I need you to walk me through this one, my man.
Okay.
I'm not seeing what I think I'm supposed to see. I'm seeing a film that I was like, I think I just wasn't. Maybe Origin just destroyed me to the point that I wasn't ready to watch something that's meaningful. But I just So I'm not. So yeah. If you would lay out for us what the film is, why you wanted me to see it, and why you thought, in juxtaposition to Origin, it would be good to talk about. Yeah.
Well, Top of the Heap was a film made in 1972 by a brother named Christopher St. John, who's still with us. His son is actually the more famous St. John. His son was a Christophe St. John, who was the soap actor who passed away some years ago. I think like maybe 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah, and he was exactly my age too. I remember reading that part. I was like, "Oh my god, he's 52." I was like, "Oh,
yeah." And so his son was the more known. Christopher St. John is also known to be he was in Shaft. He was one of the significant supporting characters in Shaft. Top of the Heap was an independent film that he made in the early 70s, and the film was made. He had to kind of make it, I wouldn't say in secret. He was very clear on what he was making, but he had to consistently underplay the real negative critique that he was having about mobility in American society. Though he couldn't underplay it when it was finally finished, because the film was then pretty much suppressed. They thought he was making a blaxploitation film, and he in quote said, I was making a film screaming at them. Maybe he would borrow some of their form, but he actually I wouldn't say that either though. but he was not making that kind of film. And the plot of the film is about a black man who's a cop who's passed over for a promotion, and he's struggling with his life as a cop, what that means to accept this kind of role and how it makes him this brutal person. But he also seems to have an air of knowledge. Well, he has a clear air that black people hate him. Everyone hates him. But he also has a knowledge that somewhat that there's something wrong with this situation. But he stays wrapped up in his own emotional state and goes from there and goes from there. The film is juxtaposed between the actual world, so his actual daily life of being a cop, his home life with his wife. He has a mistress played by Paula Kelly. Shout out, rest in peace to the great Paula Kelly. Amazing. And his daughter, and things like that. But there's also juxtaposed with these fantasies that he has, that he breaks into, of him being an astronaut and him being a Harvard man and him being the love of white people, including Richard Nixon. He actually calls, he's my friend Richard in the White House, right? He has these fantasies, and often in the beginning, his fantasies seem to, kind of go in a way that are very positive, but then they have these weird breakout moments, like when which ends up becoming a big line in the film, where he says he heard a voice that kept saying to me, "Get out of this machine." And as a voice would whisper to him that. So he goes through it and his life begins to just fall apart. And as his life falls apart at the seams, the fantasies become more strange and they begin to kind of express his own hangups, how he's not seeing the real world. And in the real world, he gets violent. He becomes despondent to emotion. Whether it's his wife, anyone, he fights black people, his fellow black people, with an extra fervor, and it just becomes this total devolving, to the point where, though, at the end of the film, and I'm gonna have to give the spoilers for it, the end of the film, he reconciles that this is the life that he has. And, this is what's going to happen. And one day he's walking and he's shot. He's killed. And the final song talks about how, at the top of the heap where man has to sell his soul. And the very last line of the film is, "I heard a voice that kept saying to me, get out of this machine." And the film is really, it's about the fantasia of mobility, the fantasy world that mobility has, where Origin is looking at mobility and playing. Origin consistently wanted to use Wilkerson's kind of expressionistic life, the scenes of the fallen leaves and her husband, and I found those scenes absolutely terrible. It's just so bad. Top of the Heap uses fantasia, this kind of fantasy world, as lies, is the lies we tell ourselves that also expose our preoccupations. Harvard, Nixon, right? Astronaut. I want to be respected. He knows
a
he's
lot
not
of press
respected.
conferences.
Conferences, being attention. The fantasy world. I immediately think of E. Franklin Frazier, but in an expressionistic way. With Frank, we talked about how bourgeois life, middle class life, is a fantasy world. It's a fantasy land, and this is a construction of the fantasy land, and his fantasies are like fighting each other, right? But I think it also does, for me, it's a study of how mobility's quest, it could also create like a bit of a social death, because he becomes socially dead in a way, right? Like no one likes him, right? Black, all the black, when he goes to arrest those two brothers, the brothers like, man, he don't respect him. But when the white cop does it, they turn around
Immediately.
immediately. And like you could read that as they respect the white person, but I think it has more to do with the fact that you a black pig.
That's what I took it as. Yeah.
Yeah, you a black
Like,
pig.
like he was saying, almost literally saying, I can't even rationalize letting you lock me up. The white man walks
No.
in immediately. They're like, here, you
Yeah.
could take me away, white man, with no resistance, but you,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah. 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 Right. And and then watching
Wow.
it
Yeah.
in comparison with Origin also, in Origin there is this camaraderie between I wouldn't know if it was I wouldn't know say those people were her mentors, but her compatriots, you know,
Mhm.
her editor. There was the other white woman at the party. I don't quite know what her role was, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of white, you know, camaraderie that had. While in top of the heap, all his camaraderie with white people are either lessening him, his
Mm.
partner. They act all base and they become kind of base
All I need is
individuals.
blowjobs and a meatball sandwich.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
They become base, or how his boss treats him. He likes him because he's a hard cop, but he needs him to kind of tone it down a little bit. You know, the white man that he goes to see, they're who's an older cop. They don't really have anything. Or actually it is affection, but it's based on a kind of sadness about their existences. So there's no real
Mm.
conversation. So there
Mm.
is this diminishing returns. And I'm
Mm.
watching the film and I'm like, this is not showing us any kind of positivity about buying into Empire, which the cop is
Mm.
a clear image of Empire. Another thing that's really interesting, and I think this is if you
Mm.
juxtapose it with Origin, is that his connection through blackness when he does it is all through aesthetics. The watermelon scene, the jungle music, right? When he's with Paula McKee, they're Paula Kelly, excuse me. Paula McKee's another woman, sister, but he they dance and drink and these kind of fake cliche ideas, right? So he becomes almost
Because, by the way,
superficial with his own
yeah.
blackness. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was wondering. Okay. So is that why we see? Because when he has the fantasy with the blonde white nurse, to me, I thought, okay, this is the shout out to black exploitation, the trope of the black superhero and the white woman.
Yep.
But then we see her disrobe, but then when
Yeah.
they start to go into their sex acts, it's
Mm-hmm.
just the camera just pans down and we don't see anything. But when
Right.
he's with the sister,
Right.
it's very, relatively speaking, graphic. And as you're
Yeah.
saying, it's the music, the weed, the
Yeah.
liquor, the
Yeah.
rolling around on the
Right.
ground.
Right.
It's all of that. So is that juxtaposition part of it, or was there
Yeah.
something else?
I think the way he still sees whiteness as classy. She's
Mm.
in a white room,
And she just
white robe,
calmly disrobes, right? Yeah.
she's
Perfectly
Swedish.
blonde. Yep. Swedish. Perfect. Like
She's
the
Swedish.
perfect whiteness.
Right, perfect whiteness. And the black woman's jungle, you know, and things like that.
Yeah.
She's a jokester, complete, you know, and he only sees his blackness through aesthetics. St. John to me is making a negative criticism of it, because if you're seeing a character who is so disjointed. If that's how he's relating to his own people, then that's just not a good thing. DuVernay, though, she does a thing that I hated, that scene where they went and sat and had the barbecue.
Oh man.
She does these things where because she also is back to the aestheticizing of blackness. She sees blackness as these pieces you put on your coat, right? Yes, black people go to cookouts. I know plenty of us do that, but it's a reduction of who we are, especially in a film that's supposed to be about politics and political
And then
happenings and social happenings.
And the only commentary on the topic that we get is her complaining how when she used to bring her husband, it was a whole bunch of criticism about her having a white husband.
Right.
So
Which
it
is,
was like,
oh man.
so it even further adds negativity to that space, as if,
Mm-hmm.
people could judge how they want, but I think it's a rational question to maybe ask in that context. Like, because it starts with one of the family members saying, I got a good black man I could introduce you to now that your
Right.
husband's gone, and she's like, oh, here we go again. And then,
Right.
so yeah, it's perfect. It makes sense the way you're describing it. That's why, of course, because that
And
cookout is just another piece of it's jewelry. It's
it's
another hat.
jewelry, exactly. It's jewelry. It's accoutrement, right? It's like,
Yeah,
come on,
accoutrement.
okay, and it's like, and I think white people like that stuff because, like, oh, cool, man. I love when it's when they get to experience blackness, and
Yeah,
because
and
that's what they see,
safely,
and
and
that's because that's what they
safely.
see blackness as, right? Food, right? Food and party and dance, right? But Saint John, like I said, in Top of the Heap,
Mm.
he also sees that, but he sees it as a superficiality. It's a superficiality, right? You're having a superficial relationship with it, right? And Top of the Heap comes from a tradition that was really popular in the late 60s and early 70s of just acknowledging that this system does not work for us. I mean, to close your film saying, get out of this machine. I mean, I don't know if you saw you heard the lyrics. It's a J.J. Johnson song. The lyrics of the song, they're saying at the top of the heap where man has to sell his soul, he does
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's just heavy. They're like they're not they're screaming at you that this does not work. This does not work. This arrangement does not work at all. And I think it's a fascinating film then to also look at it in terms of, and I don't know how much we can get into this today. We can talk about it another time. Is this idea of aesthetics and aesthetics being really part of a colonial project? And there still is not an acknowledgement in the art world and in the Black art world how deep that goes. There was further in the 60s, part of the third cinema tradition was acknowledging that culture is needed to have successful revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And you must interrogate culture and cultural product, cultural practice. I mean, I'm not going to get into a dissection of whether or not it was effective, but that was part of the idea of the Cultural Revolution in China.
Mm.
Looking at cultural practice, how it keeps up class divisions, class structures, how aesthetics was aesthetic as a form, it was created to classify, right? Part of European Enlightenment, right? To classify, to put things into classes and say, hey, European stuff is this, the African stuff, the Asian stuff that fits within the framework we've created, that's acceptable. If it's outside of the framework, it's unacceptable. And when I watch people like Duvernay, they're working in this way of obeying European aesthetics, which the Black cinematic tradition is where I get to Black Hollywood and Black cinema. The Black cinematic tradition was throwing that out the way. And the third cinema tradition as well, it was saying we have to abandon all of that. That stuff will actually not bring a revolution to our culture. We cannot adopt their forms because it's not just a content thing. It's also a form thing. How it's packaged, delivered, constructed. It's also form, which I think is lost in conversations consistently.
Now you said that sounds like that McLuhan-esque type of argument a little bit.
Well, it is, but
The medium, not the message. Yeah, I hear you.
I'm
That's deep.
completely with him. McLuhan, Clyde Taylor, rest in peace. Many people they have said this. This is not, even Europeans have said this. This is not like I'm even McLuhan, like, the
Hmm.
most radical of Europeans have this same critique.
And he was no radical. He was
No,
still,
he
but he was
wasn't.
at least on that clear. Yeah.
He was very
So that's
clear. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's why they punished him. And he didn't even understand why. He was like, because they were like, you tapping into that colonial stuff, my dude. You don't even know what you're
Nah,
doing.
don't be doing all
Get him
that.
out of here.
Don't be
Yeah,
doing
like,
that,
get him
right?
out of here. Yeah, yeah.
Don't be doing that.
So, so just real quick, I want to share this because with you will center some of the work in this book that I just got that you put me
Yeah.
onto. We mentioned Roca the last time,
Mm-hmm.
Cinema Novo, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
this I've seen just a little bit of what is in here, and this point about colonialism and aesthetics. We definitely gotta. I'm very much looking forward to getting into that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what Roca, I mean, he has many things, but his biggest point was, he says cinema needs a cultural revolution. If you have to understand that Hollywood cinema is an arm of imperialism, if you're going to have a radical revolutionary cinema, it needs to be an arm of that. So you need to then have a revolution culturally as well to get it to that point. So then you have to interrogate not just your content, but also your form. One of the things I talk about a lot, and this is something that I have talked to my students about from time to time, is, you know, film and technology have a big relationship as well, and big tech works in the film industry. And we sometimes think of technology as it lives in a cocoon, right? That even its form development, its application can also be colonial, ideologically centered towards right wing or counterinsurgent thinking. The actual technology we're using and how we use it and how we're socialized to use it could also contribute to that. So and that's what the third cinema people were doing. And I think that's another thing about independent film. He talked about independent film needs to become free of the preoccupations of classist Hollywood cinema. And the problem with Black Hollywood today is they are preoccupied with Hollywood form. They are preoccupied with Hollywood form, and they're finding people who will do that, right? How much time do you have? I have one last story. I think this last story could actually be.
No, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I was just checking. I'm checking all the text messages to
So
make sure but I'm good. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure I can share this, and maybe take it up with me if not. I recently had the opportunity to spend some time with Charles Burnett, the filmmaker. We spoke on a panel together. It was great. Fantastic brother. I was excited just to be around him. I have a lot of respect for his work, Killer Sheep, To Sleep with Anger, all the work he's done. But I also was curious because he's lived through a lot of periods, and I had questions, and I was just hoping he would be forthcoming, and he was. And one of my biggest questions I had with him was about Sidney Poitier, because I was very curious about his relationship to Hollywood, and then also, did he have any interactions with Sidney? And he told me two stories and then told another story to a group of students. I think I actually triggered him wanting to talk about Sidney when I talked to him. The very first thing he said to me was, this wasn't a story, this was more of a thing. He said, I asked him, I said, did you ever have any contact with Sidney, and did he ever show any interest with working with Black independent filmmakers in the 70s at the LA Rebellion? He said to me, it was known, the first thing he said to me, that Sidney would not work under a certain budget. So then you added that there were no Black filmmakers who could get that budget. We could not even get him on the phone. One. The second thing he told me was a longer story. Was he actually says, but later on, he actually had a meeting with Sydney to be a producer on a film that he never did. And this was like the 90s, I think. He met with Sydney, um, and he said he was a nice man. He really enjoyed his company, but every time Burnett presented the stories and the ideas of what he wanted, Sydney kept trying to turn the story into something that was the aesthetics of Hollywood. And when Burnett kept pushing back on that, he knew Sydney would not work with him. And they had like a very friendly handshake, and they walked off. The last story, now he shared this with students, and I found this very interesting that he shared this with students. The last story he said was, even later, there was a film that Sidney Poitier had did called The Annihilation of Fishes with James Earl Jones and Vanessa Redgrave. When he was still casting, he tried to get Sidney to do it. He sent it to an agent because this time Burnett had capital that was not just black, it was white capital, and it was of a certain budget that maybe Sidney could be agreeable to. The word was Sidney was into the script, so forth and so on. He never talked to him. He talked to an agent, so forth and so on. Right. And years went by, no talk. He eventually ran into an agent who knew Sidney. And Sidney, the agent said, Sidney's never going to do this film. He just doesn't do them. He's not interested in it. And I asked Burnett, I said, what, like, what's the kind of conclusion? And Burnett didn't really say, he kind of looked at me. It was like, what do you think the conclusion is? But I find it interesting because Poitier historically was known when he was alive to counsel people like Denzel Washington. He would counsel the new Will Smith, the new black actors. Denzel does it for newer black actors. And I always found it interesting that, Sidney Poitier, the only black director he ever worked with, I'm pretty sure about this, was himself. And, Will Smith, yes. I'm almost positive about this.
So the Let's Do It Again in Uptown Saturday Night films.
He directed those. He
directed those. So he got himself the budget he needed.
Through himself. And, Will Smith, up until, what was it, King Richard, had never worked with a black director. That was talk amongst black people in the movie business for years. It was one of those side conversations that black people would have. So is Will gonna work with a brother but behind the camera at some point? It was always brought up. And when King Richard happened, we were all like, oh wow.
So is he good now? For
some people he is.
Is that all that's enough?
Yeah, for Black Hollywood, for Black Hollywood people, that's all that's required. Totally, right? But I share this story to talk about this is part of a large tradition that lives in Black Hollywood. It is a project amongst them to be a wing of Hollywood completely, ideologically, economically, everything. It's all about that. And we have to interrogate. So if we think about that, I don't understand how we can't interrogate also the aesthetics of how these films are made, what they abide by, and then also what aesthetics we're socialized to think are worthy. Top of the Heap to me is a film. It has rough edges. It's rough around it, but it's a rough world. He lives in a rough world. Rocha, when you get into the Rocha stuff, he'll talk about that. He says, like, look, I'm working class Brazil. If my film looked like some shiny shit from Hollywood, that would be disingenuous to what my life is like. And then who done it? Then thus, who was that film for? Who was that film for in the end? And if I want to make films for my people, they have to also be in form and texture, expressing how they are and how that life is and that perspective. He talks about, but he wasn't the only one. There's many people, and if you look at the tradition of the films of that period, not just in America, but then also you go to Africa. I brought up like Sembène and Mambete. and filmmakers like that, there is this adherence that Europeanism can't just be fought in content; it has to also be fought in form.
So let me real quick on. So I just want to be clear because I do have one sort of closing question.
Totally.
What? Why then? So So is him being a cop in this film in Top of the Heap?
Mm-hmm.
Is this then? You're saying this is part of him initially performing what is said to be an acceptable path for upward mobility for Black folks, while maybe also making a comment, because that particular profession couldn't have been an accident. He could have been upwardly mobile as a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
Or so that he's clearly trying to say something about the police then maybe as is or because I got stuck on
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad. I now hearing you explain, I now see why the film was the way it was. I wouldn't claim to have caught all of this by myself in an initial watch, but so that's the question I'm asking. Is this first question is the selection of the context of his employment and upward mobility in real life, being a cop, meant to reflect something specifically about the police and upward mobility, or police and Black people, or?
Well, I think it's supposed to. He's creating a situation where the character Lattimore is his name, has entered a space where he can't have any kind of respect. He's delusional. And I think he wanted.
I'm sorry to cut you off. He even at one point is yelling at his boss, "I can do whatever the fuck I want."
Right.
He's
delusional.
Boss is like, "The hell you can."
Right.
Boss is like, "The hell you can."
I think also if you look at the time of the 70s and this idea of brutality, the brutality that was happening, like what's the opening scene? What do they send him out to do?
To break up a protest.
And he says, "This is some bullshit."
That's his opening line. Yeah,
this is some bullshit, right? And
then he literally gets pissed on.
Yes,
which is
and I think. And I think also it adds to even white people won't respect him. Like the new left. You have all these new left people. They won't respect him either. And to me, how I experienced it was it's an example of how delusional he is, and thus people who engage in mobility actually are. Because then what does he then lean to? Brutality. I'm going to force you to respect me. So when he finds the white man, right, who probably you're thinking sold drugs to his daughter, he beats the crap out of him. And what does the white man do? He laughs in his face,
at him,
and calls him the N-word. So I think St. John saw the cop as something he could work with dramatically that would have the most fire. It would create these kind of dynamic strength, because the image of the cop in Black communities, even to this day, is just not a positive one, right? Probably is a little bit more forgiveness to a certain degree now, but back then definitely not, especially in the heated time of that was happening, right? And that to me is why I find it an interesting usage, like rather than like a professor or something else, something that's directly in line. But also it's about keeping order, right? He becomes a person that keeps order, and he's a wing of the state. He's a wing of empire. But then what's funny is, what are his fantasies about? Being part of empire. He wants to be an astronaut. He says, my friend Richard Nixon, right? He wants to plant the American flag on the moon. He wants to ride down in a car parade. Right. And he's so preoccupied with the most brutal images of America, which I find very interesting. You know, you could accuse St. John of being heavy-handed in that way, but I feel like it was necessary, you know. But that's also the times. I think they wanted to. There was an insistence on making sure you did not miss the point in that way, right? Kind of grabbing you and shaking you a bit, you know, in that way, and you know, not hiding your hand.
So listen, I do want to ask one more question,
Yeah,
and unfortunately we'll have to close on this one for now.
sure.
But I again thank you very much. Look forward already to whenever the next one will be. Just let me
Hmm.
know. And but you titled this Black Hollywood versus Black Cinema, so I just want to come back to that
Yeah.
and have you close talking about. I feel like you've clarified that, but what do you mean by Black Hollywood versus Black cinema?
So I was actually asked this question recently when I was on the panel with Burnett, and
And is
I've
that on
written about
TV?
it.
On TV? Is that
No,
out somewhere? Okay,
sadly,
okay,
no. Sadly, no. It wasn't
okay.
recorded. But what what I said was, is kind of what I was talking about before. What do we think of Hollywood to be? Hollywood to be a informational or propaganda wing of American empire, right? Um, that's what it is. It is how we tell the narratives of our culture. We construct how we want our people to see, believe. You know, I think it's no secret, and it should be no surprise that what did Obama do the minute he got out of office? He went to Hollywood, right? He wants to be part of the narrative, right? Because he knows that's where the narratives are written, right? And then what do we understand America to be? If we understand America to be an imperialist nation, a colonialist nation, all these things, if you're going to be the informational narrative arm, you're going to embody those things in your work completely. So, Black people who create within the aesthetics and economics of Hollywood are in that sphere. Black cinema, though, and this could be a longer conversation when we kind of get into the history of Black cinema. Black cinema started antagonistic to Hollywood, starting with Oscar Micheaux. When Oscar Micheaux, who might be the first independent filmmaker, was making work, he was making work a form outside of Hollywood because he had to do it on his own for various reasons, but also in how and what he talked about, how he constructed his narratives, right? It was antagonistic. It was antagonistic. Think about his film, not Body and Soul, within our gates, right? Um, which is thought to be a. I think there's a. He never outright said it. People have said this in post that it was a response to Birth of a Nation in a way. I don't know if he clearly ever stated that, but people have said that. And if you watch the film, it's easy to make that. But that's an antagonist, right? Because Birth of a Nation, which is a Hollywood product, one of those regarded pieces, even to this day, as it's deemed negative because of its racism, people still want to give it credit because of montage and all that type of stuff. But that's a whole other conversation, right? So from its inception, it's been antagonistic. And then you had years where Black filmmakers would come in and out. You think of Melvin Van Peebles, right? When he made Watermelon Man, and then he wanted to do his next film, Sweet Sweetback. They wouldn't let him, so he had to make an antagonistic film to Hollywood, right? Then you had the LA Rebellion and cinema, Black cinema. We think about cinema, right? And the cinematic culture and what cinema has been about. And cinema does not need industry, right? Industry has subsumed cinema, but it does not need industry to exist. So if you think about Black cinema, it is a form that is about blackness in cinema. And if you look at blackness as a consistent antagonist to empire, black cinema has to be an antagonist. It's just, to me, it's simple math. And then if you look at the work that's been created, it is antagonistic. That's why so many of the black cinematic works are suppressed. That's why Top of the Heap would get suppressed the way it is. Chameleon Street. The white Charles Burnett hasn't been able to make a film for a long time, which we can get into another time.
We didn't even get to Chameleon Street. I watched that for the
Oh, you
last.
did?
I did not remember, but the first thing that became clear to me is that I never knew the true origin of that classic drop from Black Star.
Yeah.
My conditioning has been conditioned. I was like, where is this? I for some reason thought it was a Sam Jackson line. I thought I was hearing Sam Jackson because that's all I've heard for the last 30 years. But I never could place it. So when I watched, we got it. There's
And then if you talk if you talk about the history of Chameleon Street, and Wendell is on record about the suppression. I think I shared you that one video that had it was an old, was it Dateline or one of those? Did I share that with you? There's an old interview with him about how it was suppressed and other types of films, the Homeboy movies were. I don't know if I sent that to you. I might not have sent that to you. From the early 90s.
You did, I missed it. I don't.
Yeah, I might not have. But there is this tradition of these films being suppressed. Now, history is very interesting, and yes, people will immediately ask, have there been black films in Hollywood that you think work in black cinema? And if you look at Hollywood history, there's a lot of interesting ebb and flows that have allowed weird things to peaks and valleys, like Watermelon Man. But look, I think it's very telling that after Van Peebles made Watermelon Man, he never made a Hollywood movie again.
We saw what you did for we not letting that happen again. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to do a movie about what? About a guy who killed? No.
Nope. We don't. We will replace you. We will find Isabel Wilkerson.
But that's the thing, and that's where I always sit. It's cinema does not need industry, but industry has taken over cinema. Not just cinema though, art, and that's a whole other conversation of how industry has taken over art and diluted art. I think you have to have the legitimate question: what is art in the age of industry? I mean, that's Walter Benjamin. Taylor, many people. What is that? But blackness is antagonistic to this culture, and if it's a black cinema, if it's a black cinema expression, it would be antagonistic. And when I watch a lot of these movies you have in this background here, from Origin to Dear White People, these movies are there to help empire sustain itself in a myriad of ways.
Listen, Mtume Gant,
brother,
it's always a pleasure, my man.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. No, and I will say, like, I did not much want to see Origin, but I think in being able to talk about it with someone like you, it helps me parse out things that I need to be able to speak to much more clearly. So I appreciate that.
And I need the help. I think we all need the help.
Yeah.
I mean, every time, and then it creates a document because, again, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure I'm going to get a student to come in and say, man, Origin was great. I had a student, you know what was a real honor today, man? It happened today. A student at Morgan State brought a friend of his from Howard who's on spring break to one of my classes because he was like, you got to experience Dr. Ball's class. And I told him afterwards, it was like, that's a tremendous honor for me because I was like, whenever students want to stay around after class to talk or build on something that's not about, can you fix my grade? Can you, or when somebody's going to come on spring break because his homeboys said you need to sit in on a class on spring break.
Oh, that's great.
I said, wow, that was a huge honor. But the point was, my point though, ultimately, that one of the main things he wanted to talk about was he said, I wanted him to come to the class because he said he saw the new Bob Marley film and that he liked it. So I said, you got to come to Dr. Ball's class because he had a whole different. And I said, I cut him off. I said, it's trash.
It's trash.
And then we went and had a whole conversation about it. But my point is, my students see these things, man. I mean, they see them.
Same. And I work in a film school. Same.
So I'm glad to have, if I'm helping you, you definitely helping me. So, and I'm sure the audience is, I've seen some of the chat, everybody's appreciated. So like it's very helpful. We're happy to have you work through your process with us.
Yes, for sure.
Whenever necessary. And I'm gonna start reading the Rocha. It's Rocha. I'm gonna start reading the Rocha or Rocha. I've been saying it all over the place. But I'm, so whenever you want, we got Elon is in the chat, wants to join future conversations.
For sure.
I think once in on the Chameleon Street talk. So whenever
we need to do one on Chameleon Street. I would love to sit down and talk about. I mean, I could talk about that movie for years.
So again, just let me know whenever you're ready, and if there's something you need me to do or us to do in advance for homework, just send it on through.
Do it.
And let's do it. I mean, Professor Gant, all the good people in the chat, peace to you, everybody. If you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say, we'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like It throughout the platform. Thanks again to you and everybody else. Peace, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, that set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything, 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 everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.